What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition, the DNVR Rams podcast, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code PPDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope you're also having a nice little start to your week. We'll start, as we tend to do of late on the Monday show, with the best and worst of the weekend. My little tip of the cap to Dan Patrick, one of my favorite radio hosts. I watch him on Peacock typically, but whatever you want to call that these days, of all time, he's great. I highly recommend you check it out if you are one of the younger listeners and don't know who I'm talking about from a better era of sports media. But best of the weekend, CSU comeback win over Wyoming on top of another win for the women's team. The women's team outscored New Mexico 19-0 in a 20-point win on Saturday afternoon. Really, really impressive win on the road at the Pit for the ladies. The worst of the weekend, locked myself as well as my fiance and her parents out of my own house after going out to eat yesterday. That was a humbling experience, to say the least. As somebody said on Twitter, though, you're not a real homeowner until you successfully break into your own home. So I guess I got to check that off of the bucket list. Really, really frustrating scenario, though. We've got a fun show for you. We're going to get into a lot of different stuff today. I'm going to play some post-game clips from Saturday afternoon. I thought Ali said a lot of great stuff, gave some great insight into some of the individual standouts and just this team's mentality right now. I'm going to give updated Mountain West power ranking. There's some teams I feel like that are trending upwards right now, including CSU. We'll get into all of that as the show goes on. If you missed it, go back and check out the conversation I had with Kevin Lytle on Friday. You can watch that entire show on YouTube or listen to it where you get your podcasts. I give some takes on the state pride uniforms, which were unsurprisingly a little bit controversial, but it was a fun show, I think. And Kevin is always great, so it's worth your time. You can actually just check out the convo with him. We uploaded that into Spotify, Apple, etc. as well. So if you don't want to listen to the whole show, or if you don't have time to, you can just check out that convo as well. If you missed it, Sacramento State is MAC bound. This is where we're at with college football, I guess. Northern Illinois is in the Mountain West. Sacramento State's going to be in the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. They have been hell-bent on making the jump from the FCS to the FBS, despite the fact that there seemed to be zero to little interest from the Mountain West in the Pac-12. Sacramento State reportedly going to pay close to $25 million. I think it's about $23 million when you factor in what they're going to pay to the MAC, on top of the $5 million fee that it costs to elevate from the FCS to the FBS. You got to pay the NCAA $5 million. Where does that money go towards? That's debatable, but pretty crazy. I will say my instant reaction to this was bold choice. It's a really bold decision to spend close to $25 million to play in the MAC, where you're going to have to ship your student athletes halfway across the country to play in snowstorms in the middle of Ohio and Michigan in front of crowds of 5,000 people on a Tuesday and Wednesday night. Don't get me wrong, MACtion is a fun little quirky, element of college football, though I think it sucks for their particular fans. I mean, imagine if CSU played its football games on Tuesday nights, how big of a pain that would be for the fan base. But this is a bold move, to say the least. I mean, that's putting it kindly. I don't really see how this math is going to add up for them. From what I've read, like 37 of their $43 million athletic budget is subsidized. They made less than $1 million in ticket sales and ad revenue combined last year, according to one report I saw. I just don't see how that is going to add up for them. Maybe it's one of those situations where they just needed to get into the FBS. They were having trouble filling out their schedule. I guess the theory is have some success there and bank on future instability realignment, which is fair. It's likely to occur. And maybe at that point, you're able to leverage your position in the FBS to an invite to another league like Mountain West, like the Pac-12. But I do think it speaks volumes that the Pac-12 and Mountain West, despite them willing to put up, close to 25 million, really wouldn't give Sac State the time of day. And I think part of it is you look at them and they're just not a needle mover. Like, they've had some success, certainly under Troy Taylor. They came into Canvas and punched the Rams in the teeth a couple of years ago. I was actually on the sideline for the TV broadcast. I was a sideline reporter for that. It was kind of a fun experience. Would love a chance to do that again down the line. But it was not the most fun experience from CSU's perspective. I mean, that was a really good team that had Cam Scattaboo on it. Also Marte Mapu of the New England Patriots, and they had talent. They've had competitive stretches, but in terms of sustained success, it's just nothing like what you've seen from North Dakota State, from South Dakota State of late, or the Montana schools. And as we're seeing here in the Toyota chat, I do think it's an element of ego from the admin at Sac State. They got told no, and now they're basically putting all their eggs into this basket and trying to make it happen out of spite. Maybe they'll prove to look smarter than all of us in the end, but I just don't see how this proves to be a win for Sacramento State in the end. I don't think playing Miami of Ohio and Eastern Michigan is a move that all of a sudden is going to get people in Sacramento and California as a whole to buy into Sacramento State. Move over USC, look out UCLA, here comes Sacramento State. I will say I can respect them betting on themselves because there's a lot of that happening right now, and that is part of what I've talked about with the departing Mountain West schools going into this newly formed version of the Pac-12. It's a leap of faith. It's an investment in yourself. And in Sac State's defense, that's exactly what they're doing. It just logistically makes far less sense to me than what some of these Mountain West schools are doing, or even some of the moves that the Mountain West has made in response to remain afloat and keep their league alive. It's just been a really weird couple of years with this whole realignment carousel, and I'm very curious to see kind of where this goes next. Obviously, I've talked about the Pac-12 expanding before 2027. How many, who that proves to be, we shall see. Even with teams like North Dakota State and Sac State really investing in themselves and making bold moves to the FBS, really don't think it made sense for the Pac-12 to seriously consider those types of moves. If you were willing to do that, at that point, you should have just taken a couple of more Mountain West members from the jump, taken enough to be able to, get a majority vote to dissolve the league. You would have avoided a lot of the headaches that you had at this point. And there's probably an argument that maybe they should have done that in the first place. I've talked a lot about why a true reverse merger was not going to happen. Washington and Oregon State just weren't going to do it. And I think there was a real desire from some of the departing schools like Boise State, San Diego State, CSU, who really invest and spend in athletics to try and keep up in this arms race. I think there was a desire to want to get away from the San Jose States of the world and some of those brands who just aren't all the way in. They just aren't committed to competing at a higher rate. There might be some sense in that, realistically, looking at the landscape right now. Maybe they're reading the room accurately. We shall see how all of this plays out over the next couple of years. But you want to be aligned with like-minded institutions, and that's, again, a big part of what this newly formed Pac-12 has been. It's been kind of the group of 5 teams who are, really banking on their ability to be something more. And you can argue that's what Sacramento State is trying to do with this move. I just don't see how it works out, aside from immediately hitting the ground running, then I guess getting lucky with the timing of future realignment and being able to leverage this into, an invite into a bigger league. Maybe that does happen down the line. And again, they'll look smarter than me in the end. We'll see. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But I do wonder what the potential impact of this is for other FCS schools. You know, it's reported that Tarleton State has some interest in jumping up. They've been pretty competitive of late. Certainly, it could be a possibility with Montana State, South Dakota State, those types of schools. But I just don't think they have that type of cash to put up front, like like North Dakota State and like Sacramento State are currently doing. I mean, that's just a really big ask on top of also having to significantly increase their athletic budget. I mean, you look at a $43 million budget, like that's not on par, you know, with the higher rated FBS type programs. We'll see. Again, well, they've had some nice stretches, but they're coming off of a 7-5 year. They did spend a bunch of money on the portal. They've lost their head coach. Brendan Marion is now the offensive coordinator at CU, so they'll be on their third coach in 3 years. I was really surprised they did not go with Troy Taylor. Just felt like that would have been such an easy move, but who knows? We'll see how this ends up playing out for them. I'm going to play a clip real quick of Ali Faronesh. This was his intro statement after CSU's comeback win over Wyoming. Then we're going to get into that game in detail. Really fun matchup at Moby. The crowd filled in nicely, kind of late arriving, about 10 minutes before tip. I was scoffing a little bit. But I felt like the Rams showed real toughness in this. So here's Ali Faronesh following that win over Wyoming.
And it's the board. I think it's awesome environment, awesome atmosphere. Moby was rocking tonight, and I thought our guys really fed off that. I thought that sparked the run. I thought Jace's steal right there, I thought that changed the whole game. Once he stole that pass, I thought that was the difference in the game and brought the confidence level and the juice to the arena. And once they called timeout, our guys were ready to roll after that. And I thought it was a big response too in the first half, getting down 9. She was a 9 or 10. When Josh was out, that put us in a little bit of a strain. We hadn't played JoJo and Brandon much together, and you saw we were out of sorts a little bit on offense there. We were out of sorts. And I thought the way we responded after that to finish the half the way that we did, to cut it to 3 to end the half, and then the response of JoJo in the second half to give us the minutes that he did. I know the stats don't show as much as what he did, but I thought he helped us a lot in the second half, and that was the challenge: is how can we respond to the second half? And we specifically talked to JoJo about that. And then Kyle too. I thought Kyle was really big in the second half. I thought he struggled a little bit in the first half, but his response in the second half changed the game also. And we need him in the second half to make those plays. And then obviously Jace was phenomenal tonight. Jace and Rashawn were phenomenal tonight. And I thought our guys stuck to the game plan of attacking the paint. For us to only shoot 13 threes and being a really good three-point shooting team, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought we shot the right threes at the right times, and then I thought we attacked the paint the way that we wanted to. If you're going to switch us all game long, like, we have to attack the paint. Our guys executed it flawlessly in the second half.
In the last 10 minutes.
I'm going to hit on a lot of what Ali talked about in that intro statement there. I felt like that was a really good summary of this game. Certainly one of the best performances we've seen from Jace Butler, if not his best game so far. 6 blocks from Kerry Booth. Bemba came in and completely changed the tone from a physical standpoint. A lot of individuals stepped up in this one, but I felt like collectively the mentality, the headiness to be able to stick to the game plan, even when they went down 10. I mean, it was huge to be able to cut it to a single possession game after going down 9 in the first half. But then you go down 10 in the second half, and it really would have been easy to get sucked into a 3-point shooting contest. Wyoming was jacking up a ton of threes in that second half, but the Rams stuck to the game plan. And, Wyoming, they were switching everything. So CSU was getting some favorable matchups down in the paint. They were getting to the rim with consistency, 30 points in the paint. Also had 30 free throw attempts, which was huge. I mean, I focused on that significantly on Friday. The fact that CSU only had 10 free throw attempts in that first game against Wyoming, it was a big factor in what went wrong for them. We're going to continue to talk about this game. We're going to play some more post-game clips. Let's take a quick break real quick. Let me shout out a couple of our awesome partners. First things first, I want to shout out the homies over at Branded Bills. You know the drill by now. They are our awesome presenting partner. I've got a couple of branded bills on set here. They have an on-campus collection, which CSU is part of. You've seen more and more people rocking branded bills around FOCO on campus at the games. You love to see it. I even saw a bunch of the football staff rocking branded bills this past season. Branded bills is a great option if you are looking to take your brand to the next level. You know, whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fids, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you are looking for, you know, custom gear for your company, whatever it may be, look no further than Branded Bills. Start your order. Their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel you need. They have a partnership with CSU. Head to brandedbills.com. Use the code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Also want to talk to you about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They offer 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the 4Runner. You might need it if you're going to be hitting the mountains anytime in the next couple of days. Sounds like we are finally going to get some mountain snow. Certainly need that moisture, but when you are driving in a Toyota, you have the durability and the dependability to be able to make it through. They offer more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. They've got 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra i4 Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides and SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. It is unsurprisingly all class with CSU in the post-game press conference. I applaud the way Ali Farouk-Manesh and the players handled things, as they said. It was all about them. You know, they weren't fixated on what's happening up north, despite the fact that after that win in Laramie, there was some crazy talking happening from the Wyoming players. Sundance is a guy who never seems to stop talking, and his staff. I mean, I haven't really seen assistants talk trash to opposing players and fans the way those Wyoming assistants were on Saturday. But here is a clip of Ali Farouk-Manesh answering my question on what CSU's motivation was after, you know, obviously losing by double digits for the first time in a decade, and after, you know, hearing a lot of chirping from the fellows up north.
Motivated. I mean, I think they were motivated just in general. But yeah, they were motivated. There were some things that were said that was kind of disrespectful, and that's up to them. But for us, we're just gonna play basketball and be about us and talk about us, and it's about us more than it is about them.
A little subtle acknowledgement there, but again, Ali unsurprisingly took the high road. Nico Medved did that every single time. I would expect nothing less from a really classy individual. I like that. I like that they didn't get dragged into the dirt here. Like, certainly this is rivalry. Certainly this game meant a lot to CSU, and I think they came in with an edge. I think both teams did. You know, Wyoming played hard, had a couple of instances of where it looked like CSU might be on the ropes, but to CSU's credit, they were able to stay in the fight, which is exactly what you would hope to see, especially after getting punked a little bit in Laramie. I mean, I really felt like the Rams showed real toughness in this game. That stretch to be able to cut it to 3 points before halftime, that's massive from a momentum standpoint. And then even being able to withstand another run from Wyoming in the second half, you go down 10 there. There's plenty of time to get back into the game, and I even tweeted that. Just stay with it, hit a couple of open threes. They actually only ended up hitting 1-3 in that second half. They only took 5 3-point attempts. But again, that's because they were able to get advantageous scenarios repeatedly down low. You know, Jace Butler was tremendous in this game. I felt like his assertiveness was much needed in a game where, again, it could have been very easy to get dragged into a 3-point shooting contest, and instead he just kept putting his head down, attacking the hoop. He would, you know, make decisions, had a career high both points, 18, and assists with 6. Really felt like a breakout showing from him. Now, it wasn't surprising or anything like that. We've been really high on Jace Butler on this show for a really long time. But it was the type of game that had me reevaluating just how high his ceiling may be. Ali Farokmanesh compared him to Jalen Lake this game, and I feel like that's something that Kevin and I have discussed. Both, maybe I don't remember if we talked about it on the show. We certainly have talked about it on this row. He's just one of those guys who's really steady night to night. He's not the flashiest player in the world. He's not out there dancing on guys, but he can get to the hoop. He's got a deeper bag than you maybe expect. He's a solid 3-point shooter. And defensively, Jace Butler has been huge, and I really felt like his 3 steals along with Kerry Booth's 6 blocks, that was a major element of what kind of flipped this game on its head for CSU. And it was a part of what allowed them to get back into this game. Butler had a steal. I wrote about this, and again, I highly encourage you guys to check out the content on the site. Wrote about a 1,600-word feature on why the investment in Jace Butler and Kerry Booth is paying off, as well as takeaways from that win. I've got a column on the State Pride uniforms. I think we've had like 6 pieces in the last week, so a lot for you to check out. Please consider becoming a diehard and getting access to all of that premium content. I do a free piece here and there just to kind of give people a chance to check it out if they are maybe on the fence. The State Pride column, for instance, is free. If you want to check it out, maybe get a little sample before you commit. You do get a free t-shirt subscription. I'm just saying. It's worth it. Great value in the end, and a lot of my colleagues really do some incredible work. Getting back on track, though, this was a game where I just felt like the Rams showed real maturity. You could have got sucked into a 3-point shooting contest, and instead you recognized they're hacking the hell out of us. On the surface, it's easy to look at the disparity in free throws between the two teams and say, man, this was really one-sided, and Wyoming got screwed by the refs. And occasionally there can be questionable officiating in the Mountain West. I certainly had some head scratchers both ways in this game, but as a whole, it was what this game was. Wyoming was hacking the Rams a lot like what Air Force did in the second half. They were kind of daring the refs to make the calls, and the officials did. I do think there was an element of Ali Farokmanesh really working the officials in this one. Some of those charges against Bemba, and then looks like there might be one against Booth, but Ali had really ripped into him. He was begging for a technical. The crowd would have ate it up. But there's a human nature element in that, right? You work the officials, and all of a sudden some of those 50-50 calls start going for you. But when you're just switching everything and you're getting bigs against guards in the paint, it's going to put you in a good position. And to CSU's credit, they took advantage of that every single time. And more importantly, when they got to the free throw line, they were able to knock them down 25 of 30 compared to 5 of 8 the other way. That's a massive disparity, but it was accurate for what this game was. I feel like the Rams did a great job of both asserting themselves physically on both ends of the floor, especially down the stretch, but they did so with intent, and they did so without playing recklessly. They weren't racking up a bunch of fouls on the other end. They weren't crashing into the paint with reckless abandon, no plan, and getting called for charges. Bemba took a couple, and you got to watch the little chicken wing. If you extend the arm, you're going to be in kind of a precarious position. But I really felt like the patience from CSU and the savviness to continue attacking a weak spot over and over again from guys like Jace Butler, like Rushan Bemba. I mean, those two, I got the stats right here. Bemba got to the line for 10 attempts. He was 8 of 10 and at a little under 18 minutes on the floor. Jace Butler went 11 of 12 at the line. That was massive. Not only are you getting to the line, you're getting the opposition in foul trouble and putting them in a tough spot, but you kept scratching, clawing, fighting your way in 1 point at a time, took this game over. And eventually, I feel like the straw that broke the camel's back was kind of that stretch right around the under 8-minute mark where Jace Butler had 2 steals. He hit a bunch of free throws, but then he ultimately, had a steal that led to a fast break layup for Jevin Mooney's, and Wyoming calls timeout call a timeout a couple of seconds later, and you just felt the energy and the momentum flip in real time. It was really, really fun to see. The crowd got really into it. I will say, good attendance. It wasn't the most lively crowd throughout the game. I know that there were some really frustrating stretches. Again, it did look like Wyoming had CSU on the ropes at multiple points in this matchup, and they played hard. To their credit, they're playing hard under Sundance. I've made some jokes, on the show, the rivals, but they're playing competitive basketball even against some of the better teams. San Diego State, Utah-State, now CSU. They have lost 3 straight though. But I mean, if CSU can continue to get this type of balance with the bench production, got 3 straight games of 30+ points of bench production on top of some of these younger guys like Jace Butler and Kerry Booth elevating, I do think there's a possibility of making a little late season run here. How far they end up going, we shall see. You're likely going to have to win 4 games in 4 days in the Mountain West tournament to have a viable path to the NCAA tournament. I do think there's a path to 20 wins, though, and that would be real success after some of the struggles that this team had. I've been impressed with the way that they've been able to work through some of the wrinkles in the rotation. We will see what happens with Josh Pasquarelli's health. Not having him against UNLV could be tough. That puts in a spot where you need some of the younger guys like JoJo really step up. He had a brutal first half, but I did think he responded well in small stretches in the second half defensively, and that's a tough spot. Wyoming pressing, they're playing really aggressively, and there have been some times where he's shown his inexperience this season. I still feel like his future is very bright. Still feel like he's got a lot of talent and untapped potential. It takes patience. We've seen that with Kerry Booth. We've seen that with Jace Butler. Jace has been more steady than some of those other pieces, but I just feel like if he can even score in that like 12 to 15 points a night type range, you're likely going to get double digits out of at least one of Jevin Mooney's and Kyle Jorgensen, if not both, like you did in this game. Rex Steiner's capable of knocking down shots. Pasquarelli can hit shots for you. They've got a lot of different guys that can be highly impactful. And maybe they don't have the star power of a Neat Clifford or an Isaiah Stevens, who's really just going to take over the game individually. But I do think they've got a lot of guys who are playing some of their best basketball of the season, and Jace Butler is certainly one of those guys. Here's a clip of Ali talking about Jace and kind of the growth that he's shown this year. Another guy who, they recruited out of high school, initially went to Washington. It didn't really work out there, and now he's come to CSU, and look at him flourish. I mean, he was a diamond in the rough type. Check out that feature I wrote on the site. But here is Ali Farokhmanesh talking about Jace Butler.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys that said no first and then finally said yes. But you just trust Jace. He is Jalen Lake to me, like a lot like Jalen Lake, where you just trust him on the court. You trust him in all those situations to make plays, and he came up with every play tonight. And everyone's sitting on his left hand, and then we ran that drive play to actually go to his right hand the next possession, and he got all the way to the rack and got the finish, which was stretched the lead to 4 then. We've called on Jace multiple times. We've also not called on him, but he's played 30 minutes. And that's the best part about Jace, and that's why he plays, is you know what you're going to get every night from Jace. Whether that's if he's scoring or not scoring, you know what attitude, effort, and how he's going to approach the game is going to be the same every single night out.
Is he playing with a different level of assertiveness right now?
Yeah, and I think sometimes you got to go through it to get confidence, right? It sounds easy, like, hey, just be more confident. But sometimes you have to go through those experiences and feel those moments. And I think he's starting to feel more and more of those moments. And it only happens through experience, right? We can simulate it, we can practice, we can talk about it, we can do some voodoo, whatever. But at some point, like, you have to go through it to get that experience. And that's what's happening for him. It's almost like he's going through his sophomore year right now. Whereas the start of the year was kind of his freshman year still, and he's trying to figure it out. And now he's truly playing like a sophomore borderline, he's like a junior almost now.
I wrote in that feature that Jace, although technically a sophomore, this was essentially an extension of his freshman season over the first half of the campaign. Now he looks like a guy who's playing like an upperclassman, and I just feel like we're seeing a different confidence level from him. And like Ali talked about that, I think so much of that has to do with him just getting that opportunity to grow. And Jace talked about it post-game too. He talked about how much fun he's having getting this chance and how thankful he is to Coach Ali for believing in him and giving him this opportunity. And to Jace's credit, regardless of whether he's the hero of the game or not, that guy's going to play gritty defense. He'll make an impact on the glass if he needs to. He's going to generate steals. He's going to make the right reads and dish the ball to open teammates. But if he needs to, he can put the ball on the floor and get to the rim. And I think while he is a lot like Jalen Lake in that night to night, you're just going to get a really savvy, high effort type showing out of him. I think he's a little bit more naturally athletic, be a little bit more explosive. Lake might have had a little bit more length, but I mean, he's really smooth on the drive, and he gives defenders kind of different looks with the lefty drive. Also, could go to his right, as Ali talked about there. But I was really, really impressed with Jason this one, and again, it really feels like the sky is the limit for him and for Kerry Booth. Both of these guys, they've had their highs, they've had their lows over the course of the season. Kerry's been in a lot of different roles. Bemba gets hurt early in the year. Kerry ends up essentially playing the 5. Him and Jorgensen were kind of back and forth in that 4-5 range after playing a lot of 3 in the summer. Now, he's kind of more comfortable in that rim protector role. 6 blocks, second time this season he's been able to rack up 6 blocks in a single game. He's the type of athlete that can change a game, and he is raw. He still has moments, where he drives with the basketball and doesn't really know what to do with it. He's got to refine his post game a little bit, but he is skilled and he's shooting threes at a great clip, way more efficient than I would have anticipated coming in. And this was the type of game where the patience with some of these younger players who you banked on, being able to maximize after bringing them over from high major programs. This was a great selling point for really how skilled these guys are and what their ceilings can be. But I also think it's a great representation of what this coaching staff does, and how good they truly are. You see guys, they come into this program, they get better. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. And then you look across the board, whether it's, a role guy like Joe Palmer, or at the true, NBA caliber talent like a Neat Clifford. You come into this program, you get coached up, you get an opportunity to play early, you get a chance to develop. Sometimes you lose those guys, Kyan Evans obviously dips for North Carolina. That's tough. I really hope to see some of the players, especially some of the guys who have already been through the ringer and, have been at bigger places where they weren't put in a position to succeed. I hope they understand the value in being at a place like CSU, where you're going to get both an opportunity to compete at a national level, and you can get to the NBA. I mean, look at Roddy, look at Clifford, Steven, even. I mean, there is a path to the NBA, but there's going to be a real investment in you as an individual player, and it would have been really easy to throw the towel in or to, get impatient at least. I don't think they were going to give up on these guys because you know how good they could be. But there were some rough stretches, at times, and we're really seeing it pay off now. And I just feel like the more of an opportunity they get to grow, I just feel like, Kerry Booth and Jace Butler could be really, really important pieces in the Pac-12 era. Definitely hope to see those guys stick around. I think there's a lot of happy players on the roster. I was talking about that with Steve Ivey post game, and I agree with what he said. He's talked to a lot of the parents, and I think a lot of these guys that have been at bigger schools and are now in a position where they're getting an opportunity to play a ton and grow. They're having fun. But here's Ali Farokhmanesh talking about Kerry Booth and the need for patience.
He's still learning. I was telling Adam and that out there, like, he came into college at 17. So, I mean, he's not in today's age. Like, I mean, look at half the freshmen in college basketball right now. They're 19 and 20 years old. The guy at New Mexico is 23. I don't know how that works. But so, like, Kerry came in at 6 years younger than that guy. You know what I mean? So all that, we talk about experience. Well, he was down a year and a half already in experience to start his career. Then he goes to Illinois and doesn't get to play. So he's down another year of experience. So like, he's still growing and going and getting through it. And I think that's what's exciting for us. I think Kerry's getting more excited about it because I think he's starting to see, like, okay, there's these small little adjustments I can make, because he is highly skilled. And now he's starting to learn how to use his body in certain situations, how to attack people with his body before they attack him. And I think you're starting to see that progression happen night in and night out. But it takes time and patience, and that's what this program's been about, like patience to help kids grow.
All right, we've emphasized a lot, Jace Butler, Kerry Booth, they were awesome in this game. Two of the guys who I haven't really focused on so far on this pod or from a written content perspective is Rashawn Bemba and Jevin Mooney's. I did write about Jev before the Air Force game, or maybe it was after the Air Force game, right around that time last week. But I feel like those guys were really steady and really big part of what allowed CSU to pull this one out as well. Jorgensen did some big plays too, to his credit. Hit CSU's only 3 in that second half. Made some really timely assists and rebounds. But I mean, Rashawn Bemba in this game plays less than 20 minutes. He's only, a little under 18 minutes. 14 points. He's 3 of 3 from the floor. 8 of 10 at the free throw line, pulls down 8 defensive rebounds. I mean, he's so patient down low, and his physicality is really unique. He overwhelms defenders, and that's why, again, a lot of those Wyoming guys, they're just flopping all over the place. That's the only thing they could do, because they certainly couldn't slow him down in the paint. I mean, they could not guard him. And it just shows how impactful Bemba can be. He's not a guy that's typically going to give you 30 minutes. I mean, he does wear down as the game goes on, but he can give you 20 to 25 really impactful minutes on both ends of the floor. And he was just so big. And I felt like there was a stretch, and Ali talked about this post game, but there was a stretch in the first half where things were not going great for CSU. Wyoming was getting to the rack really whenever they wanted. And, guys like Caden Bennett were hitting shots, although I will say, Sundance Waste was in his feelings a little bit because Kevin Lytle on Brady Hull's show pointed out that statistically speaking, what Bennett did against CSU in the first border war game was kind of an anomaly, and that role players tend to be more impactful at home than on the road. That's not a slight. That's just the reality of the situation. Caden Bennett in that second half, 1 of 6 from the floor, only 3 points. So he did hit some shots early, had 10 points in the first half, was a total no-show in that second half, and jacked up a lot of bad looks. Kevin might have been onto something, just having my guys back there. But I was really impressed with again, the patience and just steadiness out of guys like Bemba and Jeff Mooney's another solid game. 15 points, 6 of 8 from the floor, 5 rebounds, a couple of assists. He just does whatever is necessary of him in any particular matchup. Had a couple of really impressive, difficult mid-range looks that he was able to knock down. Him and Rex Steiner both have a little bit of early 2000s NBA in them. I love it. I feel like stylistically, part of it's the headband with Rec, but and also his, crossovers, the way he carries himself, just the way he dribbles the ball and stuff. He's got a little bit of that early 2000s vibe. But both those guys aren't afraid to put up a tough, fadeaway or something like that. And they hit some tough shots in this game, both with double-digit point production in the win. I just felt like you got exactly what you needed out of the veterans, and you had a couple of up-and-comers who really raised their game in this matchup, and it was great to see. Again, Pasquale's health is going to be a big factor. He's grown a lot defensively. Felt like finally he was starting to find his groove again from three-point range. He's in a boot at the end of that game. I think he just sprained his ankle, but that could be potentially pretty detrimental, especially for a guy, who is defending at a good rate. But we'll see. I had some questions about why were Darnell Slater and McConan not on the bench. Both those guys were sick, so nothing you need to worry about too much. I get it. Whenever you see players not on the sideline, the immediate thought, in the portal era is, oh man, they must have dipped. Not the situation at all. Really impressed with the way that CSU was able to respond to adversity in this game. And again, just the way that they were able to establish their physical presence and really assert their will in this game. Here is Ali Farouk-Manesh talking about kind of what changed for the Rams and really showing some legitimate toughness in the win over the Pokes.
I thought we got tougher. It wasn't a whole lot of game plan stuff. The game plan didn't really change from first half to second half. I thought we really just got tougher to get catches where we wanted the ball, tougher to fight for post positioning, to draw the fouls. I thought we just accepted fronts in the first half. And then the second half, like, we really fought for catches. And I kind of got on them at the 12-minute mark when I think it was down 12. And I just thought the toughness level, I think it was 57-47. And I thought the toughness level of the guys picked up in that moment to really seal to get catches, because they were switching their 6-foot guards on to Rashawn. You got to punish them for that. And I thought our guys did a great job of doing that. Rashawn held his balance, and they did foul us every single time.
I believe CSU outscored Wyoming 30-11 over the last 12 minutes and some change. Got a ton of turnovers. They only had 5 turnovers forced in the game, but it resulted in 10 points. That was really advantageous for CSU. They were capitalistic, and so was Wyoming, for the record. Some of the turnovers that the Rams had directly correlated with those stretches where Wyoming was able to extend their lead. But CSU didn't let things compound. They didn't panic. They stayed true to the game plan. They continued to attack the paint. They got to the line. They knocked down their free throws. And they showed some emotional maturity on a day where you needed to win. I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you lose this game, the season's basically over at that point. I mean, you'll still have people show up for the orange out, but this now gives you an opportunity to, maybe generate some momentum here and go on a late season run. Do I think they're going to win 12 straight games and be seconds away from a Sweet 16 like last year? That's probably asking a bit much. But I do think this team is good enough to make a little bit of noise. I do think they're good enough to get to 20-plus wins. I would like to see them do that. How far they're able to go, we shall see. But I think there was a lot to be encouraged by in this game. The physicality, the savviness to be able to stick to the game plan, not getting drug into a three-point shooting contest. Booth, his block party, if you will. He had 3 or 4 really impressive closeouts on 3-point attempts as well. I think one of his blocks was on a 3-point attempt in the corner. But there were a couple of other ones where he contested really well, put the shooter in a tough spot, but without fouling. There were some moments where you liked the idea early in the season, but it really felt like instances where he would have fouled in the past. He showed some growth there. And his impact in this game was undeniable, but a lot of different guys stepped up, 5 players in double-digit scoring figures. This team maybe won't have a first-team all-conference selection. I'm not sure they're even going to have a second-team selection outside of, I could see Mooney's maybe. I guess if somebody really closes the year hot, we'll see, especially if the Rams get on a winning streak or something like that. But I do think they've got a lot of different guys who are capable of kind of carrying you in a win. Sometimes that's a tough spot when you're not able to just, have a neat Clifford to say, here's the ball, here's the keys to the car, go, this is your moment. We're just going to lean on you like you did at Boise last year and some of those really impressive showings. But I do think also it helps that in other times it can help you to not be so dependent on one individual. Would you rather have an NBA talent like Neek on the floor? Of course. I'm not saying this is a better scenario. I just mean you can't just key in on one guy, and if he has an off night, you're good. Mooney's has had a lot of big moments, but we've seen Jorgensen be capable of giving you a 30-piece. Rexsteiner can get really hot from three-point. Pasquarelli on any given night can get hot like he did in the CU game. If now you start getting more consistency offensively out of Jace Butler, and who's got a great-looking jump shot and always playmaking with more frequency, putting the ball on the floor, 3 straight games with multiple assists. He's doing a great job, as is Gary Booth. I like the roles that guys are in. And like Ali said post-game, it really does feel like they have 7 starters. Being able to bring Jev and Bemba onto the floor at any given moment is just such a huge asset for this team. And I mean, you have some other guys you can put in, like Joppa, if you had to as well, who have shown, they can give you a dependable 5 to 10 minutes as well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the Rams close out here. I think this week will tell us a lot about this team. But, when you're plus 22 in bench points, plus 9 in blocks, when you score 2 points for every turnover, and also, when you finish in the paint, CSU converted on 14 of 16 layups, plus obviously they got hacked a ton so they get to the line. To be able to put 30 points in the paint up without a single dunk, that's pretty impressive. That's a nice finishing rate off the glass. That's a display of good touch and just great finishing from CSU in this game. 32 to 11 over the final 12 minutes and some change. Maybe more get tongue-tied. Maybe Moby felt like a morgue. It's a tongue twister at times in that first half. But man, it was rocking over the final 8 minutes, as my guy Taylor says in the Toyota chat. When it came to life, it was a lot of fun, and it was one of those where you just kind of felt CSU snatch their soul there with a little over 5 minutes to go, and Wyoming had to call that timeout. You just kind of knew, no, this is CSU's game now. They've taken full control. Helped that you had multiple Cowboys, in foul trouble. I feel like they kind of got out of sorts. Part of that, I think, is better on-ball defense. Part of that, I think, is Kerry Booth swatting everything within a couple of feet of him, 5 rows into the stands. I just feel like Wyoming got a little bit more hesitant offensively as the game went on. Maybe started settling for outside jumpers instead of attacking like they were early in the game. Whereas CSU, and instead of just jacking up a bunch of threes, which they are prone to do at times, they took advantage of the situation. They got in the paint. They finished at the free throw line, and they got a lot of great contributions across the board. It was a really fun day at Moby. And now you got to keep that momentum going, right? Like, you've won 3 straight games, but these were 3 games that you needed, and you've beat San Jose State at home. Wyoming at home is a game you always have to win. Air Force is maybe the worst team we've seen in the league in a long time, and they hit some threes in that one, but even so, CSU outshot them. Now can you beat some teams from the top half of the league? And UNLV is really on brand this year. There are moments where they look like they could be a top 3 team in the league if you just watch them on that one night. The inconsistencies, are baffling at times, but they've got some real pieces, and this is going to be a tough test for CSU. At the moment, you're 3 full games out of a first-round bye with 6 games to go. Would need Nevada and DCU to have a pretty catastrophic close to the season here, on top of probably having to win out, I would think, to be able to jump into that top 4. But, can you get in that 6-11 game or even the 7-10 range? That's a lot more appealing than the 8-9 matchup, which is at 12 p.m. Pacific time, I think. And then even if you win, you're matched up with Utah-State. It's like probably a border war part 3, which historically has not been a super fun scenario. And your reward if you win is Utah-State. Like, I just hate everything about that scenario. The 6-11 game, the 7-10 matchup, far more favorable. And then, I think you take your chances with a team like San Diego State in the tournament, or, New Mexico even, though I think both those teams are trending the right direction and capable of going on a run. I'll get into that in just a second when we talk about the updated Mountain West power ranking. Just a little insight into UNLV. They are on brand, as I said. They're the kind of team that'll lose, a DU type game like CSU had earlier, and then they'll come back from 20+ points and beat Boise State. They are really dependent on Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, but he is a stud, man. He averages 19 points a game on 50% from the floor, 39% from 3-point this year, but he's putting up close to 30 a game over the last 5. He had 36 in the comeback win over Boise State. The former Illinois guard is balling. He's dangerous. I mean, he's a guy who can get to his spots. He can create for himself. He's really dangerous. And it kind of reminds me of some of those Bryce Hamilton showings from a couple of years ago. The Rebels, after a rough stretch, lost 4 straight at one point. Now they've won 3 straight. They have a pretty favorable remaining schedule here. This feels like a big test for both of these teams to validate themselves, right? You've won some games here. UNLV at home. If you really are a top, if you're a team that's in the top half of the league, this is the type of matchup you've got to win. Historically, right when everybody's starting to buy into UNLV, they won 3 straight. They just had this crazy comeback. This historically is when the other shoe tends to fall, though. So we'll see. I think you should have some confidence. CSU's gone on the road and had some nice wins in the Thomas and Mack Center before. The Isaiah Stevens comeback was always the craziest, but it's usually a pretty competitive game. Can you bring the same type of physicality that you've had of late? Maybe knock down a few more threes for a road win. You're going to be dogs, I would assume. I do think you're going to have to hit a few more threes than you did in this game, but I don't want it to be a 3-point shooting contest. Even with CSU being the best 3-point shooting team in the league statistically, I think the inside out approach that we've seen with the frequency of late, it directly coincides with some of the success that CSU is having on top of just making a leap defensively. It wasn't a great game defensively against Wyoming, at least for the first 20 minutes or so, but there were key stretches in the first half to be able to hang within 3, and then again, they were pretty locked down over the final 12 minutes or so. CSU, I think, has the 5th best scoring defense in the Mountain West right now, the last that I checked. So I mean, they've been competitive. With that in mind, let's get into the Mountain West power ranking. I'll give a couple of thoughts on the Utah-State Memphis dilemma at the end. But at the bottom, it's everybody knows Air Force, San Jose State. Air Force is a struggle. You feel bad for them just watching that team, to be honest with you. And San Jose State, love you, Tim Miles. They've just got no depth. Kobe Garland is a fun watch, but outside of him, it's rough. I've got Wyoming at 10. I feel like Wyoming, Fresno, CSU have kind of been flip-flopping with each other over the last month or so. Pokes have been competitive. They're a tough out for anybody giving them credit, but they have lost 3 straight. So I think putting them at 10, especially with Fresno coming off of a 30-point win, was over Air Force, who's terrible, but still on the road and win by 30. That was a really big day for that team. Fresno is one of those teams that they make it hard on you defensively. They defend the 3-point line really well. They've given up the lowest amount of threes per game in the league, or they've got the lowest 3-point percentage against in the conference. They're one of those teams that can hang around and be miserable to go up against. They just don't have the depth, but they are trending upwards. I've got CSU at 8, but I would put like an eyeball emoji behind them because I do think they're trending the right direction. But this is the week where you prove it, right? Even going 1-1 against UNLV and San Diego State would be significant. But if you could go 2-0, now you're in a position where you've got San Jose State and Fresno State next week, and you can really get some positive momentum going. I wanted to put them above Boise, especially with Boise collapsing the way that they did, but they also had a win over New Mexico recently, so I felt like it kind of evened out. CSU still needs to prove it a little bit more, I think, before we jump them over Boise State. Boise, it's kind of like just when you start to believe in this team, they blow it again. Really frustrating year for them. I do have UNLV at 6 right now. I think they're dangerous. I think Gibbs Lawhorn's playing as well as anybody in the league, looking like a player of the year. If he could get them on a hot stretch down the final 3 weeks here, I think he could be in the conversation for player of the year. I imagine that'll end up going Falslev, but we'll see. They're riding high, but is this the typical UNLV roller coaster where you've got the peaks and valleys, or is this a true turnaround? Both CSU and UNLV trying to validate themselves this week. GCU at 5, a lot like what I would say with Boise State. Just kind of when you start to believe in them, they'll have kind of a head scratcher, but I would label them the worst of good teams in the league, of the top 5 type range at least. Nevada, I'm higher on them than most. I've got them at 4. They just got a lot of length. It feels like everybody on their team's like between 6'6" and 6'9". They don't have a 7-footer or anything out there, but they're a pain in the ass to play. They create steals, and they beat GCU head-to-head in an impressive comeback win, so I felt like they deserved to be above them. I've got UNM at 3. I do think they're dangerous. They're a really balanced team. They hit a lot of threes. They drive well on you. They rebound well. They're a really well-coached team under Eric Olin, and I do think New Mexico is a team that, if they can get into the NCAA tournament, is dangerous. Could see them, like CSU being in a position where you get like 12-5. That's not a team you necessarily want to have to go up against. I have San Diego State at 2. Quietly been really good offensively this year. Plus, top 3 in scoring D as usual. They're always relentless defensively. I will say, while they are a great defensive team, they do kind of hack the hell out of you and dare the refs to call a lot. They put a pressure on you to make it a really tight game. But they're dangerous, and some of their guys like Guath and Miles Bird are really coming up strong here down the stretch. Finally, we've got Utah State at the top, 7-game winning streak currently. Excuse me. There's a really impressive group on both ends. They're one of those teams that can go on 13, 15-0 type run just like that. They create steals, they create havoc defensively, they knock down threes. They've got a lot of guys who are capable of burning you, and they've been really, really impressive. I will say Calhoun would be a guy I would have my eye on if I was Kansas State in the post-Jerome Tang world. I did just briefly want to talk about this whole Utah-State Memphis dilemma, which is dilemma is probably being dramatic, but I just felt like Memphis came off really soft. Penny Hardaway, in particular, whining about Utah State running up the score. Memphis was still pressing. What do you want them to do? Just quit and dribble the basketball out for the final 2 minutes and let you get uncontested layups? Like, play the full 40 minutes. In a world where net rankings really dictate perception, especially for some of these non-high major teams, Utah State has every incentive to try and make this look as lopsided as they can, and so would Memphis, by the way. If they weren't if they weren't surprisingly bad this year. They've really been awful in league play and look like a team that's quit. They're not well coached. They've got a lot of athleticism, but they don't play as a team. They're the anti Utah State. Like, this was such a direct clash of programs and how they operate. But I feel like Memphis is the classic, man, when things are going well, they're going to pound their chest, they're going to talk shit. And then now it's woe is me. Hey, you should be nicer to me. I mean, yes, they scored 13 points in the final 90 seconds, but what are they supposed to do? 2 of the final 3 shots in this game were the final 10 seconds were from Memphis. And again, they were pressing. It's not like they were just punting on the games themselves. I felt like it was really, really soft of Memphis to react this way. And again, while there's a debate about sportsmanship, maybe the last dunk was a little unnecessary. Getting mad about a team playing with 90 seconds to go is ridiculous, especially when net is such a big factor in how you're perceived. If you're on 13 with 90 seconds to go, you close the game soft, you end up winning by 4 or 5 instead. That really hurts you analytically. That really kills you from a metric standpoint. There's an argument to be had about whether we fixate too much on that kind of stuff, but so long as they are dictating the conversation and the narratives, they're a factor that coaches have to be aware of. And teams like Utah State, who aren't just going to get the benefit of the doubt come Selection Sunday the way that 500 teams in the Big Ten do, they have a real incentive to do whatever they can, juice that resume a little bit, and to frankly put it on Memphis. They scheduled this game it's kind of a wonky scenario to play at this stage of the year, but both of these teams, Memphis and Utah State, scheduled this game because they knew they could need a resume booster, with the NCAA tournament coming up. And for Utah State, I credit them for playing the game one, but really taking care of business. That's a dangerous, dangerous team. Does kind of feel like they're so good, it's going to be a situation where it costs them their coach again. But I mean, they just seem to reload. Their ability to sustain success over the last 5+ years or so has been so impressive, despite Odom and Sprinkle and all these different guys walking out on them. It's been impressive. They get real ballers, and Sam Merrill's still one of my favorite players I've ever seen in the league. Falslove is a lot of fun. That's a good team. Darius Brown this past year, Cada, they've had a ton of really talented dudes. That's a great hoops program, and I'm glad they are going to be in the future Pac-12. Does feel like they're tuned out on football at the moment. Maybe Bronco Mendenhall will be able to revive that program a little bit, get it back to where it was. I mean, they were a real force there late in their WAC days, and then even when they came into the Mountain West, there was a couple times where there were 10-win teams. It'll be interesting to see. If you missed it, I was on Steve Ivey's show. You should go back and check that out. Always fun to talk hoops with Steve. I appreciate CTV for interviewing me on Saturday as well. You can find that on their socials. I'm a big proponent of student media. It's where I got my start. I think there's some highly talented kids working both for the Collegian and for CTV and KCSU right now. But it's always great to be able to interact with them a little bit. I'm eternally thankful for the experiences I had during my days as a student. It's always fun to try and be a mentor. It feels weird to say. It makes me kind of eye roll a little bit. Like, me, a mentor, really? Like, go ask Kevin Lytle. That's my mentor. But thank you for listening to the DNVR podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. We'll be back on Friday. I'll have some more written content throughout the week, trying to get some big interviews scheduled. I don't want to tease too much in case it doesn't happen for Friday, but we've got some stuff in the works. So we'll see what comes together. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Thank you for supporting us as always. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.